Only in Kentucky can you find a town named after the winner of a poker game and a crossroads where early settlers nailed a serial killer's head to an oak tree. Hi, I'm Michael, and I'm learning a little bit more about Kentucky, one county at a time, all 120 of them. And today I'm learning about Webster County. Also, shout out to New Frontier out of Moorhead for this 100th anniversary ALH shirt. Pretty cool. In August of 1799, before Webster County was carved onto a map, the dense cane brakes along the Pond River were the hiding grounds for two individuals, one Micah Big Harp and Wiley Little Harp. These cousins were among America's first documented serial killers, leaving a trail of murdered settlers across Tennessee, Illinois, and Kentucky. The spree reached a tipping point when the Harps stopped at the home of a frontier doctor named Robert Robertson, while local settler Moses Stegall was away. They murdered a guest, split Mrs. Stegall's head with a hatchet, and killed the Stegall's crying infant child. When Moses Stegall returned home to find his family slaughtered, he pulled together a posse, including frontiersmen John Liper and Silas McBee, tracking the killers through liles of swampy timber. Liper spotted Big Harp first and shot him in the spine. As Harp lay paralyzed on that forest floor, Liper held him at gunpoint. Big Harp confessed to 20 murders on the spot, expressing regret for only one thing: killing his own infant child just months earlier. When Moses Stegall rode up, he didn't wait for a trial. He drew his hunting knife and cut off Big Harp's head while the man was still breathing. The posse packed the severed head in a canvas bag and rode north to the intersection of the old Nashville to St. Louis Trail near present-day Dixon. They spiked the head high on a white oak tree at the crossroads, creating a pretty grim landmark known for generation as Harp's Head. As trail travel increased, small outposts took root. In 1794, Revolutionary War veteran William Jenkins opened a log stagecoach inn 5 miles north of Dixon to serve travelers along the Wilderness Road. And by February of 1860, the Kentucky General Assembly officially created Webster County from pieces of Henderson, Hopkins, and Union counties. Local leader Ambrose Mooney donated 10 acres of his farm to establish the county seat, which lawmakers named Dixon to honor former Lieutenant Governor Archibald Dixon. For the county name itself, they chose Massachusetts Senator Daniel Webster, paying tribute to his decades of work trying to broker peace in Congress as the nation drifted towards civil war. When war did arrive, Webster County became a hotspot for local guerrilla skirmishes. In September of 1861, just really days after Kentucky gave up its official stance of military neutrality, a clash broke out at Burnt Mill near Dixon. Captain Al Fowler led a local Confederate Home Guard company into the brush along the riverbank, laying an ambush for Colonel James Buckner's Union militia. Fowler's men opened fire at close range, taking Buckner and 25 Union soldiers prisoner. Later that autumn, Confederate cavalry leader Nathan Bedford Forrest led his troops through Providence to seize supplies, noting in his official log that local families lined the streets with food to welcome he and his men. As the war dragged on, local violence escalated. In June of 1863, Confederate Colonel William Hollis assembled nearly 500 partisan recruits in Slaughtersville. Union forces mounted a surprise morning attack on the camp, killing Colonel Hollis in the opening volley and scattering his raw recruits into the woods. 2 months later, in August of 1863, Union prisoners held inside Dixon's heavy log jail managed to break loose. Before fleeing town, they set fire to the wooden stockade. The flames quickly consumed both the prisoner hold and the adjacent primary county jail next to the courthouse, burning all those early civic records to ash. As the war receded, individual towns across the county grew up around distinct local stories. Slaughter's got its name inside a local general store in 1855. Resident Gustavus Slaughter was sitting in a poker game when he pulled down a winning hand, betting his winnings against the other players for the right to name the local post office after himself. And so the town incorporated as Slaughtersville in 1861, and in 1967 the state legislature shortened it to Slaughters. Clay started out in 1837 as Ashland, named in honor of Henry Clay's estate in Lexington. Residents simplified it to Clay in 1854. Over a century later, in 1980, country group the Statler Brothers put the tiny town into radio rotation across North America with their single How Are Things in Clay, Kentucky. Providence, the county's largest city, was settled in 1820 under the name Savageville by merchant Richard Savage. In 1828, a traveling trader who had been taken in and fed by local farmers suggested renaming the settlement Providence as a nod to divine favor. Situated in the heart of the dark tobacco belt, Providence built brick processing factories and stemmeries, eventually becoming the third largest dark tobacco market in the United States. During the Black Batch Tobacco Wars of the early 1900s, actually, tension boiled over in Providence as mask-wearing night riders rode through the countryside on horseback, burning crop barns and dynamiting tobacco warehouses to force farmers into a localized price cartel. Over in Wheatcroft, the town exists because of an eccentric English investor named Irving Horace Wheatcroft. Arriving in 1899 wearing tailored suit coats in the mud, Wheatcroft bought up thousands of acres of local cane rights. When the big regional railroads refused to build spur tracks to his coal pits, Wheatcroft bought his own steam engine, hired track crews, and built his own short-line railroad, the Kentucky Western Railway, running straight from Dixon to Blackford to haul his coal to market. That stretch along the Tradewater River, which forms the county's western border, was notorious through the late 19th and early 20th centuries as a lawless water highway. Because it snaked through dense bottomland timber across 4 different counties, it became a haven for moonshiners, timber thieves, and river pirates. Local marshals rarely patrolled the river swamps, allowing wildcat distilleries to operate virtually untouched along the Webster County banks for decades. Sabri took shape in 1868 alongside the construction of the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, named for St. Bernard Mining Company President Colonel E.G. Sabri. By the late 1880s, Sabri became a major regional vacation spot thanks to Sabri Springs, a resort built around local mineral wells. Weekend excursion trains dumped off tourists from Louisville and Evansville to stay at this 40-room hotel, drink the sulfur spring water, and dance in the open-air pavilion. Over on the western edge of the county, the tiny community of Blackford had its own mineral water boom along the banks of the Tradewater River. In the late 1800s, prospectors discovered iron-rich springs flowing from the riverbanks. Railroads began running weekend health excursions to Blackford, where, again, visitors from places like Evansville and Owensboro camped out to drink the rust-colored spring water. Smaller communities held their own unique origins. Poole was settled in 1826 when John William Poole bought a 2,400-acre land grant. Known locally as Poole's Mill, the village grew to house 3 tobacco factories, its own private academy, and a telephone exchange by 1884. Over in Aunton, locals applied for a post office in 1882 under the name Orton, but federal postal clerks sent the paperwork back with a red stamp, forcing them to change the name to Aunton because another Kentucky town had already claimed Orton. By the late 1880s, underground coal mining took over as the dominant industry across the western coalfield. Thousands of men went down the shafts every morning with carbide lamps pinned to their soft caps, working under constant physical danger. On the morning of August 4th, 1917, disaster struck Western Kentucky Coal Company Mine No. 7 near Clay. At 7:40 a.m., just after the morning shift descended, a coal dust explosion ripped through the main shaft, destroying the surface ventilation fans and killing 62 miners instantly. Inside the mine, survivor Claude Bordis realized the destroyed fans meant the air current had stopped, and deadly carbon monoxide, known to miners as afterdamp, was rolling through the entries. So Bordis gathered 43 panicking crew members and led them into a dead-end room untouched by the flame. He ordered every man to douse his open flame carbide lamp to conserve oxygen and avoid igniting loose methane gas. And so, working in complete darkness, the men used timber, canvas brattice cloth, and damp clay dug from the mine floor to build a thick, airtight wall across the entry. Above ground, hundreds of silent family members gathered around the wrecked shaft mouth. 3.5 hours later, rescue crews cleared the main entry, broke through Bordis's clay wall, and brought all 43 men out alive. Deep seam mining drove the local economy for another century. The massive Dutiki mine near Providence opened in 1966 and operated for over 50 years, finally sealing its shafts in August of 2019 and bringing an end to active underground mining in Webster County. Today, a life-size bronze statue of a deep-seam coal miner, modeled after former Dotiki worker Bobby Shoulders, stands in downtown Providence. During the New Deal era, federal investment left lasting marks on local architecture. In 1938, the black community in Seabury secured $6,500 in WPA funding to build the Seabury Colored School, providing a dedicated stone facility for black students during the era of segregation. That same year, construction began on the current Webster County Courthouse in Dixon. It was designed by native architect H. Lawrence Kastner, who also drafted plans for the Caldwell County Courthouse and the United States Bullion Depository at Fort Knox. The modern-style concrete building features sculpted faces on its exterior walls, hand-carved by Kastner's wife, Arminita. Webster County has also produced a wide range of notable figures. It was the home of Garrett Lee Withers, a lawyer from Clay who represented Kentucky in both the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives. and Providence native William O. Head, who served as mayor of Louisville from 1909 to 1913. Dixon was the birthplace of 19th century poet Cale Young Rice and his brother, Laban Lacey Rice, who worked as an astronomer and university president. In 1921, Dr. Robert A. Baker was born in the tiny community of Blackford. Baker went on to become a professor of psychology at the University of Kentucky and one of America's leading scientific skeptics. He spent decades publishing research debunking claims of UFO abductions, ghost sightings, and lake monsters using tape recorders and infrared cameras to prove that haunted houses were usually just settling floorboards and thermal drafts. In country music, singer-songwriter Chris Knight grew up in Slaughters. Before heading down to Nashville, Knight worked for 10 years as a state strip mine reclamation inspector, walking reclaimed dirt across western Kentucky. And in recent pop culture, Dixon gained national attention as the hometown of sisters Amy and Tammy Slatton from the TLC reality series 1,000 Pound Sisters. So, that's Webster County. What'd I get wrong this time?